Okay. So just to recap, the idea of the hot seats is it's not a presentation format. It's more of an informal format. And there's a bunch of questions I'm going to ask and put Steve on the spot here. So hang on a second. So the first question, Steve, is in 10 words or less, can you describe what your product is and what you offer to customers?
In 10 words or less,
Yeah.
Interactive, visual, wall-mounted business management system.
And what's the biggest challenge in your business right now, would you say?
I think the biggest challenge is business is obviously going more automated, more in investment, more influence from the digital side of things. My system is very much a manual, so it's like a binary digital thing. People are tending to go towards data-driven ERP, MRP, DRP kind of systems to run the business, and they have their place. They can crunch an enormous amount of data, come up with tremendous feedback, forms, results, charts, graphs, indicators. But that's one of the things I have to fight against with my business. I'm offering something that's purely intuitive, manual, and limited because of that.
Steve, could I just, you're right if I just jump in with a quick question? Yeah. So I have a huge preference for manual analog systems, despite being a geek, despite spending all my time online. Something a bit magical happens in my experience when people use manual boards rather than electronic boards, and I've talked about it sort of in writing before now. One thing I haven't done though is I haven't found any kind of evidence or research that's been done on that. Is that something you've investigated? Is there anything out there talking about the effectiveness of these systems? Because I passionately believe that manual is great. In fact, if I could turn my camera around, I've got a whiteboard that I've set up in my office. I've got 3 screens here, but I've got a whiteboard with magnets and post-its on because I love physically interacting with stuff. So I'm on your side on this one, but sure. I'm just wondering if there's some evidence out there.
It's a good question. Bernie, my background, I have a passion for, probably like most of us, for learning and reading. And I've studied and researched over the years, people likes of Edward de Bono. I've trained under a guy who you may be familiar with, Tony Buzan. Mm-hmm. Before he died, he was the inventor of the mind map. And he talked a lot about visual management and how the memory works and the relation between visual and the memory. So I have undergone quite a bit of training in the past on that. And I do have some materials to support it, which I am putting together at the moment. And hopefully this will be part of some of my future posts to support that, because you raise a great point. Where's the data to prove it works? Plus, not everyone's visual. Some people are more auditory, some people are more kinesthetic in their learning methodology or the way they work. So again, a bit like yourself, I'm going to have to niche down my market very, very carefully. But yeah, I'm putting some tools together, some cheat sheets, some PDFs, explaining the benefits of visual mapping and visual management.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm a huge fan of that approach, possibly like some of the other people in this call. I'm from a sort of operational manufacturing background, and I saw the difference between, Kaizen boards and something being stuck on a computer screen, and it's night and day. It really does make a tremendous difference. I don't know why, but I know from experience.
I think just to chip in on that and agree with what Steve and Bernie are saying, in our process, one of the things that we do fairly early on is develop these critical factors. And what we do is we ask them to write it down on a pad. Because in my experience, people think differently when they're sitting there with a pen in their hands than when they're sitting at the keyboard and sort of worrying about the interaction with the computer. So I'd reinforce that. I would agree with that.
Yeah, and I can back that up as well. As an IT person, I've often struggled with colleagues to get them to put things on a board, just a simple board on the wall, because they're technology people and they want it on the computer.
It's not elegant, is it? If it's physically on a wall, it kind of offends them in some way.
Yeah, And I had a real argument with a guy that we fell out over it. But the point is, when the boss wanders around the office, he's not going to see what's on the computer. He's going to see what's on the board. And that's makes it very visual. It allows you to just stumble across stuff that you just wouldn't see if it was in the computer. I don't know what the research is, but
so
totally
there is actually some research that would tie in with that, Paul. So I did quite a lot of work on habit formation, and what you've just described is something called a trigger. So, you know, Post-its are triggers, alarm clock notifications are triggers, and what you're talking about is a visual trigger. So there may actually be a thread there, Steve, to pull on around habit formation and triggers, because it's much harder to ignore a whiteboard than it is, you know, something tucked away in a folder on a shared drive. So that may be one line. But I think... Sorry.
So, Bernard, I just think we're heading into the areas of NLP now.
Right.
Honestly, we are. Honestly, yeah. The subconscious mind works on triggers. It comes filtering, it's deleting, distorting and deleting to make sense of things, because we take too much information in. Yeah. So 95% of your decision making is actually subconscious. Your conscious mind, maybe on a computer, you're consciously doing stuff. If you have visuals, your subconscious ticks away quite merrily in the background and gets triggered by colour, by sound and smell, all those things. So what you're really suggesting, I think, actually, is then that this is how you would trigger the mind to delve into itself and join dots together and come up with something meaningful.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Sorry, just one. Come on.
I'm just on the same page as you, Bernie. I'm no guru either, and I've still got the old-fashioned on my desk, office desk here, a to-do list.
Yep.
And you know,
that's my equivalent there. Yeah.
Exactly. Can't do without it. Yeah, exactly.
I create a to-do list every day, every single day, and this whole conversation reminds me of Kanban boards.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying everybody knows about it, but I think Bernie and Paul might have heard about it because, you know, IT people use Kanban boards and, you know, as a part of the whole agile system.
Yeah, that's right.
Absolutely, yeah. I think wherever people have come across them and used them, they're kind of quite emotionally engaged with it. I was just wondering, you know, how you can explain that to someone who isn't necessarily passionate and enthusiastic or hasn't experienced that. I promise to shut up in 10 seconds, but I remember where that behaviour trigger model came from. It was a guy called Dr. BJ Fogg, 2 Gs. He's got a 3-step model, and I actually had an email conversation with him about this. So I will share that in the chat if anyone's interested in looking at the Fogg model, because it may be a way in there. Let me just to everyone. There we go.
Just a thought on that list, because I like everyone on the call, tend to use a bit of pad and paper. One thing I have found really effective is to, at the end of like your business day, is to make a list or your to-do list, and then you find that when you're asleep, your subconscious will process that quite nicely, because you've made clarity and just, you know, you place things into the mind. In the morning, it's a lot easier to sort of pick up and start working on it.
Absolutely.
Okay. I think let's move on. I think Darren's got 1 or 2 more questions for Steve, and maybe I think this discussion is really valuable. And what's striking me about this discussion is it's totally different to any other networking group that I've been involved in. I think it's an interaction which is really valuable. So, thanks, Darren. You carry on.
Yeah, well, the whole idea of the hot seats is to instigate this kind of conversation. So it's worked out perfect. And I think, Steve, you've got some great ideas for selling and promoting your product, positioning it against the good old traditional digital stuff that's becoming traditional now, isn't it? It's becoming mainstream. I do need to take off my my Euros, Belgium, Portugal things on my big whiteboard after this, by the sounds of it. Next question for you, Steve. Can you share any funny or fun fact about you or your business?
About me, interesting facts probably were one of my visits to India. This was a few years ago when I was visiting India as a sales manager. I was flying to a place, well, the state was Assam, the town was Dibrugarh, and I landed. I think I was the only non-Indian in the state at the time, so the police or the army met me at the airport. I had my passport taken from me. I was taken to an army base, the opposite direction of where I was heading, which was to do a presentation at an oil refinery. I waited for an hour, met this colonel who told me that it was a disturbed area And because I was a special guest, they had to take care of me and make sure I didn't go missing. So for the next 3 days, I had an armed escort. It was a truck with probably 20 Indian soldiers with rifles, followed me around for the next 3 days. I stayed outside my hotel, wouldn't let me leave my room. It was a dry state I was staying in, so there was no alcohol. The restaurant was vegetarian, and I'm a huge meat lover. And all the channels except one were Indian channels, and the one was only showing cricket, which I'm not a big fan of. So I had 3 days of that. But it was interesting. The people were
in
great.
a jail.
A beautiful place. I mean, I loved Assam. Is a very nice place.
Absolutely gorgeous, yeah.
But they described it as disturbing. I think what it meant was there was terrorist activity from the Bangladesh or the Pakistani area. And funny enough, when I got back to Singapore after that visit, which was a few days later, that oil refinery that I'd visited was attacked and destroyed by some activists. So it was obviously a real threat. I never went back. But beautiful place.